chop his leg, they chop his shoulder, they beat in the coffin.
In 2023, the UK was stunned by one of its most disturbing crimes in recent memory, when two 12-year-old boys were convicted of the machete murder of 19-year-old Shaun Seesahai. The attack took place in Wolverhampton, England, and quickly made headlines, not just because of the brutality of the crime, but because of the age of the killers, making them some of the youngest murderers in British history. On the night of November 13, 2023, Seesahai was ambushed by the pair in a completely unprovoked attack. Witnesses described how the boys, armed with a machete nearly 16 inches long, set upon him with shocking ferocity. Seesahai suffered catastrophic injuries, including deep wounds to his head and body, as he tried to shield himself from the blows. The boys left him bleeding on the ground, where he was later found dead. What made this case especially chilling was the boys' complete lack of remorse. Evidence revealed that the attack was premeditated, as they had brought the machete to the scene with the intent to use it. Afterward, they bragged to friends, sent messages about the killing, and even posted about it on social media, seemingly unfazed by what they had done. Investigators discovered that the boys had been fascinated with knives and violent content online. They posed with weapons in photos, shared disturbing videos, and glorified gang culture despite their young age. During the trial, the prosecution painted a picture of two boys who were not only capable of deadly violence, but had an unsettling pride in their actions. The jury found them guilty of murder, and both were sentenced to life with a minimum term of 13 years, meaning they will be detained in youth facilities until adulthood before serving their sentences in prison. The case has drawn comparisons to other notorious child killers in UK history, like the murderers of James Bulger, and reignited debates about knife crime, youth violence, and the role of social media in shaping dangerous behavior. Shaun Seesahai's parents described him as a kind and loving young man with dreams of becoming an engineer. His life was senselessly cut short, and the brutality of the murder has haunted the community. The image of two children committing such a savage act shocked the nation, leaving people questioning how children so young could harbor such darkness. This case stands as one of the most harrowing reminders of the growing wave of knife crime in the UK and the disturbing reality that even preteens can commit acts of horrifying violence.
Why did you choose Jamie, your friend?
He was the easiest out of anybody because he would have followed me because we're such good friends.
Why did you make the suggestion to Jamie to go inside the school today?
I was planning to murder him.
Michael Hernandez was just 14 years old when he committed one of the most chilling and calculated murders ever carried out by a teenager. Born and raised in Miami, Florida, Hernandez was described as intelligent but introverted, obsessed with serial killers, and fascinated by violence. He kept a detailed journal filled with drawings, violent fantasies, and a kill list that included his best friend, Briana Ghey, as well as several classmates. On February 3, 2004, Michael put his plan into action. That morning, he brought a kitchen knife to Southwood Middle School and lured Jamie into a bathroom, telling him he had something to show him. Once they were alone, Michael attacked, stabbing Jamie over 40 times in the neck, chest, and back. The killing was brutal and frenzied, but also eerily planned. Michael wore gloves and brought extra clothes, showing he had thought through every detail. After the murder, Michael calmly returned to class, as though nothing had happened. When the body was discovered, police quickly identified him as the killer, and he confessed without hesitation. Investigators later revealed that Michael idolized serial killers like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, and he had meticulously planned multiple murders, though Jamie was his first victim. His notebooks, filled with disturbing writings and kill plans, shocked the community and demonstrated a level of cold calculation rarely seen in someone so young. At his trial, prosecutors argued that Michael's crime was not a moment of anger or panic, but a deliberate act of premeditated murder. His defense team pointed to his mental health, diagnosing him with obsessive-compulsive disorder and other psychiatric conditions, but this did little to sway the jury. Michael was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, though later legal changes for juvenile sentencing gave him a resentencing hearing. However, his demeanor never changed. Prison staff described him as emotionless, and Michael showed no remorse for Jamie's death. In 2021, at the age of 31, Michael died unexpectedly in prison from a reported medical condition, bringing a grim end to a life defined by violence and obsession. The murder of Jamie Goff devastated his family and classmates, and it left Miami in shock. The idea that a 14-year-old could execute such a plan with such coldness became a national headline and reignited debates about juvenile sentencing. Michael Hernandez's crime remains one of the most infamous examples of a child killer whose actions seemed driven not by impulse, but by dark fascination, leaving a lasting scar on everyone who knew Jaime. Jesse Pomeroy, often called the Boston Boy Fiend, was one of America's earliest and most disturbing teenage killers. Born in 1859 in Charlestown, Massachusetts, Pomeroy had a rough childhood marked by bullying, abuse, and social isolation. He was noticeably different from other children. He had a cleft lip and a damaged right eye, giving him a menacing appearance that fueled his anger and fueled relentless teasing. By the age of 11, Jesse's rage took a terrifying turn. In 1871, he lured 7 younger boys to remote areas and brutally tortured them, whipping and stabbing them, often stripping them naked and tying them up. Though he was eventually caught because of his age, he was sent to a reformatory rather than prison, serving just over a year before being released early for good behavior. That early release would prove catastrophic. In 1874, only months after his freedom, Jesse escalated from torture to murder. The first known victim was 10-year-old Katie Curran, who disappeared after going to Pomeroy's mother's store to buy a notebook. Days later, Jesse lured 4-year-old Horace Millen to a secluded beach in South Boston, where he stabbed and nearly decapitated him in a frenzied attack. Police quickly linked him to the crime, and during interrogation, Jesse confessed to killing both Horace and Katie, even leading authorities to where Katie's body was buried in his mother's basement. The murders stunned Boston, as the idea of a 14-year-old committing such brutality was unheard of at the time. Pomeroy's trial became a national spectacle, with experts debating whether a child could be truly evil, or if Jesse's actions were the result of mental illness. Though many argued he was insane, he was ultimately found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. However, due to his age, Massachusetts Governor William Gaston commuted his sentence to life in solitary confinement. Jesse spent over 40 years in near-total isolation, becoming one of the most notorious inmates in American history. He reportedly tried to escape multiple times, dug tunnels in his cell, and even educated himself, writing poetry and reading law books. Despite decades of appeals, Jesse never gained freedom and died in prison in 1932 at the age of 72. The case of Jesse Pomeroy shocked the nation, not only because of his age, but also because his crimes were so calculated and sadistic. He became one of America's first widely recognized child serial killers, forcing society to confront the unsettling reality that true evil could exist even in someone so young. His story remains a grim reminder of the depths of cruelty that can emerge at any age. Charles Starkweather, often remembered as one of America's first modern spree killers, shocked the nation in the late 1950s when he and his teenage girlfriend, Caril Ann Fugate, embarked on a murderous rampage that left 11 people dead. Born in 1938 in Lincoln, Nebraska, Starkweather grew up in a troubled home and was relentlessly bullied at school due to his speech impediment, bow-legged stance, and fiery temper. He idolized outlaw culture and became obsessed with James Dean, styling himself after the rebellious movie star. By the time he met 14-year-old Carol Fugate, Starkweather was already drifting toward crime. In late 1957, after an argument with Fugate's family, Starkweather shot and killed her mother and stepfather, then strangled her baby half-sister. The two then fled, claiming Carol was being held hostage, but evidence suggested she may have been complicit. Over the next 8 days, Starkweather and Fugate crisscrossed Nebraska and Wyoming, killing anyone who got in their way, including a farmer, a traveling salesman, and a wealthy couple whose car they stole. The spree culminated in the murder of a shoe salesman, Robert Jensen, and his girlfriend, Carol King, both shot and left in a storm cellar. The brutality of Starkweather's crimes, combined with his young age, just 19 at the time, fascinated and horrified the nation. The pair was eventually caught in Wyoming after a high-speed chase. Starkweather quickly confessed, claiming he was solely responsible, though Carol maintained she was a hostage. In 1958, Starkweather was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. His execution by electric chair took place in 1959, making him one of the youngest people ever executed in the United States. Carol Fugate, meanwhile, was sentenced to life in prison, but was released after serving 17 years. The Starkweather case became a cultural phenomenon, inspiring movies like Badlands and songs by Bruce Springsteen and Nebraska bands, cementing his image as a cold-blooded killer and anti-hero. His story stands out not only for its shocking violence, but also for how it shattered the illusion of safety in post-war small-town America, proving that evil could come from the boy next door. Craig Price. Craig Price, known as the Warwick slasher, became one of America's youngest serial killers, starting his killing spree at just 13 years old. Born in Warwick, Rhode Island in 1973, Price grew up in a troubled environment marked by poverty, exposure to drugs, and frequent run-ins with the law. By the time he was a teenager, he was already engaging in petty crimes and had a reputation for his violent temper. In 1987, at age 13, Price shocked his suburban neighborhood when he brutally stabbed 27-year-old neighbor Rebecca Spencer to death, stabbing her more than 50 times. The motive appeared to be random, an act of sheer rage and brutality. Just 2 years later, at age 15, Price escalated his violence, murdering Joan Heaton, a 39-year-old mother, and her 2 daughters, Jennifer, 10, and Melissa, 8. The crime scene was horrifying. Joan was stabbed 57 times, Jennifer 62 times, and Melissa 30 times. Price admitted to the murders in chilling detail, showing no remorse, and even described how he bit Joan's face and left gruesome evidence behind. At the time, Rhode Island law meant that because he was under 18, Price could not be tried as an adult and would be released by his 21st birthday, no matter the severity of his crimes. This caused a public outcry and led to major changes in state law regarding juvenile offenders. While serving his juvenile sentence, Price displayed increasingly violent behavior, threatening prison staff, attacking guards, and showing no remorse for his killings. His refusal to participate in psychological evaluations and rehabilitation programs meant he was repeatedly denied parole after he turned 21, keeping him behind bars on various charges related to assaults and threats. Price's case remains one of the most disturbing in American criminal history because of his young age, the savagery of his crimes, and the legal loopholes that initially meant he could have been freed. His killings destroyed a sense of safety in suburban Rhode Island, and decades later, he remains incarcerated, a chilling reminder of how early violent tendencies can manifest into horrifying acts of murder. Zhang and Li. In 2024, China was shaken by a chilling crime committed by two 13-year-old boys, known only by their surnames Zhang and Li, who brutally murdered their 13-year-old classmate using a shovel. The attack took place in Handan, Hebei province, and stunned the nation, not only for its brutality, but because of the ages of those involved. According to investigators, Zhang and Li lured their classmate to an isolated area after school, where they attacked him repeatedly, using the shovel to strike his head and body until he died. The motive, prosecutors revealed, stemmed from a mix of bullying, resentment, and fascination with violence, as both boys had a history of behavioral issues and had reportedly been exposed to violent media. After killing their classmate, they attempted to hide his body, but the gruesome act was quickly discovered, sparking outrage and calls for tougher punishments for juvenile offenders. In China, the age of criminal responsibility is 12, meaning both Zhang and Li were just old enough to face serious charges, and the case became a test of the country's approach to juvenile justice. The trial, which was closely watched by the public, detailed the horrific nature of the attack, shocking parents across the nation and prompting debates about moral education, internet influence, and youth violence. Zhang was sentenced to life imprisonment, while Li received 12 years in prison, with the court emphasizing the extreme cruelty of their crime, despite their age. The murder sparked widespread discussion about the psychological development of children, with experts warning that early intervention and mental health support are crucial to preventing such tragedies. The victim's family, devastated and demanding justice, argued that the sentences were too lenient, given the brutality of the act, but Chinese law places heavy emphasis on rehabilitation for young offenders. And this case remains one of the most disturbing examples of youth violence in modern China, leaving a lasting impact on the community and serving as a grim reminder that age is not always a shield against acts of extreme cruelty. Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe. Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe, both just 15 years old, shocked the world in February 2023 when they carried out the meticulously planned and brutal murder of 16-year-old Briana Ghey in a quiet park in Colchester, England, a crime so chilling in its precision and malice that it rattled the nation and drew comparisons to the most infamous killers in British history. Briana, a transgender teenager, described by friends as bubbly and kind-hearted, thought she was meeting her friends for a normal afternoon, unaware that the two people she trusted had been plotting her death for weeks, documenting their sadistic fantasies in a journal filled with dark, disturbing thoughts. Scarlett Jenkinson, often portrayed as the ringleader, came from a privileged background and attended a private school, while Ratcliffe, quieter and seemingly less confident, was viewed as her follower, a boy who became infatuated with her and her chilling obsession with violence. Investigators would later uncover that the pair had spent months researching murder methods, torture, and serial killers, even going so far as to write out step-by-step plans of how they would kill Briana, including what weapons to use and how to dispose of her body. On February 11, 2023, they lured Briana to Linear Park under the guise of hanging out, but the atmosphere quickly turned sinister. Armed with a hunting knife, Scarlett began stabbing Briana with shocking ferocity, while Ratcliffe assisted, leaving Briana with 28 stab wounds. The attack was so violent and sudden that Briana had no chance to defend herself, and her body was left in the park, discovered later by a passerby who had been out walking his dog. The news of her murder quickly spread across the UK, sparking outrage not only because of Briana's young age, but also because of her status as a transgender girl, leading to speculation about whether the killing was motivated by hate. However, investigators revealed that this was not a hate crime in the traditional sense, but rather a premeditated act driven by the teenager's fascination with violence and murder. Scarlett's writings, uncovered during the investigation, revealed a disturbing portrait of a young girl deeply immersed in the world of serial killers and sadistic fantasies, with notes detailing her desire to kill someone and references to infamous murderers like Jeffrey Dahmer. She wrote explicitly about her plans to lure and kill Briana, showing no empathy or hesitation, and Ratcliffe's own journal entries confirmed that he was not merely a passive participant, but someone who also fantasized about murder, feeding into Scarlett's dark ambitions. In court, the details were so graphic and disturbing that even hardened detectives were left shaken. Jurors were shown chilling text messages between the killers, discussing the murder in casual, almost playful tones, as though it were a game or a challenge rather than a human life they were plotting to take. Throughout the trial, Scarlett sat cold and emotionless, often appearing detached, as prosecutors described how she had stabbed Briana with calculated precision, while Ratcliffe, though quieter, showed little remorse. The court also heard how Scarlett had displayed manipulative tendencies from a young age, with some experts describing her as having psychopathic traits, while Ratcliffe was portrayed as a vulnerable boy who fell under her influence, though his involvement and enthusiasm for the plan made it clear he was no innocent bystander. Both teenagers were convicted of murder in December 2023, making them among the youngest killers in modern British history, and were handed life sentences with a minimum of 22 years for Scarlett and 20 years for Ratcliffe.